time, let me bring in my guests now. Navdeep Singh Suri is former High Commissioner of India to Australia. Vikramjit Singh is Member of Parliament of Rajya Sabha, former Council of the Republic of South Africa in India. We also have Professor Harsh Pant, Vice President at Observer Research Foundation. I'm going to begin with you, Ambassador Suri. The Prime Minister announced induction of Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia and UAE into this BRICS bloc. What do you make of it? Is this an attempt to strengthen bilateral ties or democratize these grouping, or perhaps offer a template to the world to make world institutions or groupings more inclusive, with certainly an eye on the UNSC, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been talking about for a long time?
I think the Prime Minister certainly dropped a hint that there was a message in this to UNSC for a reform. But the demand for expansion of BRICS had been around for quite some time. It's been the subject of intense negotiation and discussion at the official level, at the ministerial level. I think the fact that several of our friends were keen to join the grouping meant that we had to go along with their request. I'm happy that coincidentally, two of the countries where I served as ambassador, which are Egypt and UAE, are amongst the 6 that have been included into the expanded BRICS. We have exceptionally close ties with them, and I think our concern was that if you're going to expand BRICS, it shouldn't bring in countries that accentuate the tilt towards China. As it is, this is a forum that China tries to dominate.
Yes.
It isn't always able to, because BRICS charter follows a consensus-driven process. So if everybody agrees, only then decisions can be taken. But I think our concern was that this shouldn't become another way to pack the BRICS forum with friends of China. The fact that we've got several friends of India, very staunch friends of India in the expanded BRICS grouping is a matter of comfort for us.
And, Vikramjit, India in the past has played host to African nations and has offered collaboration across a wide range of issues. Is this a concerted attempt to check China's debt trap diplomacy and emerge as an alternate power center, one would say, who is trying to, or perhaps willing to, deal with these resource-rich African nations as equals?
Yes, Maria, you're so right. I think the expansion of BRICS from 5, like Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, including these 6 more countries from Africa, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and especially, Iran. So I agree that definitely India, they are Indian friends, and it is a very broad-based, a balanced approach. For example, you see the Iran has been also included in the BRICS, and UAE, United Arab Emirates, as the economic development. And it will definitely check, to answer your question, the China's growing influence in the African countries, where the BRICS nations will be now engaged for the food security, for the more arable land, and the BRICS Development Bank, which is new National Development Bank, it has to play a proactive role. But just a word of caution, Mariaji, I think the earlier BRICS was very large economies and high potential growth, but now the 11 countries are less cohesive. Some are on crisis, some are thriving. So there is a signal of expansion, but I don't think it will be restricted to trade. But one appreciable thing which India have been able to bring along is that all the BRICS leaders have expressed concerns about ongoing conflicts. And I was very satisfied with the joint statement addressing and even flagging the concerns of Ukraine crisis, because of course we should not forget Russia is a part, although Mr. Putin was not there, but he is appreciated. But the BRICS adopted a resolution that there is a need for mediation for Ukraine crisis. Also, they have flagged Iranian nuclear deal, because we all know Iran is under US sanctions. So I think this is a new powerful group emerging, not only for trade, but it will have definitely a political connotations, and it will strengthen multilateralism, United Nations, General Assembly, United Nations Security Council.
Okay, Professor Pant, we have often spoken of foreign policy in terms of doctrine. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly has stayed away from all these labels, and he has insisted on a multipolar world which prioritizes India's self-interest ahead of others. We saw that during negotiations involving Russia and Ukraine. How do you see this departure from established norms, and what could be the likely implications for India in the short and medium term?
Maria, I'm, much as I'm optimistic I look at the expansion of BRICS as a relatively good thing. I'm also a bit concerned about, where BRICS is going. I think the earlier speaker pointed out the lack of cohesion. The lack of cohesion was equally evident within 5 members, and now that lack of cohesion gets multiplied by a factor of 6. Because now you have 6 countries, entering this platform, which will make this a pretty unwieldy platform, if I may say so. And also the question about what is the end game here? It's not entirely evident to me. So while I think, as Ambassador Suri pointed out, India has been able to moderate the plans of China in terms of expansion, and while we have very good friends that are entering BRICS, I think a note of caution here that BRICS emerging from a largely geo-economic to a geopolitical platform may cause some problems for India in the long term. But as you said, in terms of how India envisions its role today, it wants to be part of multiple groupings where it is at the decision-making level. And I think a sense of pragmatism dictates that we continue to engage with BRICS as a platform, which is quite huge and quite dominant in various ways. And if you look at the numbers of global economy or population-wise, but I think the larger issue which will confront India, which India will have to tackle very carefully, is where is this going, and what is what are the plans here for bringing new members? Because we are told that this is just the first tranche of countries coming into BRICS. There will be many more rounds of expansion perhaps being planned. Now, again, India's one of the primary demands that India had made was that we be clear about the technicalities of expansion. We need to have clear parameters as to which countries are coming in and on what grounds. I think we don't know yet what consensus was reached and why certain countries have been privileged. The first round of expansion is good news for India, but whether this good news will continue, that remains to be seen. So I think the expansion itself, while it is good news at the moment, I don't know whether it will remain a good news for India in the long term, and whether the shape of BRICS will change over a period, and whether the politics is going to impinge more than the economics.
Okay, Ambassador Suri, the BRICS Africa outreach and BRICS plus dialogue, these are very fascinating terms which has been used by the Prime Minister. Dissect this for our viewers. Is India now playing for the big stakes?
I think what the South Africans did quite smartly was use their presidency of BRICS to put a focus on Africa and invite all of the African heads of state and government to Johannesburg. For us, it is an opportunity to engage with a very large group of leaders from across the African continent. And I think what Prime Minister Modi was able to do in his address to them was tell them that India is trying to be the voice of Africa, the voice of the global South during its presidency of G20. He was able to underline all of the various things that we are doing in Africa, with Africa, as partners of Africa, whether it is scholarships or power projects or IT centers of excellence or technology parks or all of that. So he was able to use that platform to make really a major statement to the African leaders. And I think that's a big positive for us, because In any case, we have been planning to host the next India-Africa Forum Summit, which is due, whether it gets held in India or in an African country. But this was a good opportunity for India to address the African leaders who had been invited by South Africa, let's understand.
And interestingly, the Prime Minister spoke about the shared history and legacies as well. Professor Pant, are you seeing these global groupings perhaps an attempt to undo the West's hegemony and shift the power balance to East?
Well, I would say to a certain extent, certainly BRICS was designed to be a platform which could raise the voice of the emerging economic powers when they were demanding a greater share in global decision making, and particularly in the economic and finance realm. And there, I think when it all started, it was a project where India was partnering with like-minded countries of BRICS to put that demand firmly on the global agenda, and BRICS have been successful in doing that. BRICS has been a very potent voice for that restructuring and reordering. So I think there is no doubt that BRICS has played a very important role in developing that consciousness in the West that something needs to be done. Where I think India differs from, say, China or Russia is in making BRICS a patently anti-Western platform, and that I think it is not in India's interest. India would not like that to happen. So certainly the demands that India has made with regard to expansion relate to that. But overall, I think BRICS as a platform for a new voice that demands a move away from Western hegemony on finance and trade, finance and economics, as well as we were hearing from your correspondent in Johannesburg. This idea of de-dollarization that has been growing up is also again a reflection of this trend that the hegemony of the dollar, US dollar, should be challenged in some ways by those who are emerging in the global economic hierarchy. So I think broadly that agenda has been put forth in a very effective manner by BRICS. How that gets operationalized in the coming years, that will be also a challenge for BRICS. But I think that issue firmly is now embedded in global consciousness, and in particular in the Western consciousness, which I think is very important if this conversation is to move forward in a productive manner.
Okay, my last question is to Vikramjit. Vikramjit, how do you see this playing out, particularly in the context of G20 and India's presidency?
Because ma'am, I was very pleased to read that India have been able to act as put a balancing act together. Our friends, United Arab Emirates, countries like Egypt, Saudi have been there, Iran also. Now they have emphasized on the importance of G20 in the BRICS Summit declaration, and they have said that the multilateral forum should strive way for international cooperation and financial stability. And India is in a very pivotal position, hosting G20 this year, and next year having the BRIC as a host of BRICS countries, and number of things, and it has coincided with our Chandrayaan landing at Moon, and Prime Minister have emphasized Space Research Consortium, and these things to be used for education, skill development, lives and livelihoods, reaching our education to rural areas, apart from climate change. And agriculture is most important, which I chair the BRICS Agri Forum. We have been engaged for seed development bank, food security, and increasing arable land. And we have to learn from various BRICS countries' experience, like Zero Hunger Project of Brazil, biofuels, which is the need of the hour. So on a whole, I think it will unfold to a very, very, very powerful group, and let's hope it strengthens multilateralism and not necessarily the anti-Western, but it will definitely strengthen South-South cooperation.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Navdeep Singh Suri, Vikramjit Singh, and Professor Pant. With that, it's a wrap from me.